Welcome everybody to the MIT Open Documentary Lab and Co-Creation Studio's public lecture series. I'm Kat Cizek. I'm the artistic director of the Co-Creation Studio. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a white Gen X woman with brownish hair and glasses, and built into the wall behind me, you might see them glass bricks straight out of the 1980s. Today, I'm in Tekaranto on the shores of Lake Kaniatario, dish with one spoon territory. It's really my pleasure today to introduce our artists talk with Hanna Haaslahti, a media artist working with image and interaction based in Helsinki, Finland. As an artist, her tool is computer vision, and she's interested in how machines shape social relations. I first encountered Hanna and her project Captured during a prototype demo at the CPH Labs in 2018 at the Copenhagen Documentary Festival. I was immediately so moved and so shaken by this work. Hanna has a remarkable capacity to interpret scientific research on perception and vision and make work from her everyday observations about life in the age of machines. Her artworks generate new narrative interaction between people. She explores possibilities of human-machine-human collaboration. Today, Hanna will talk about digital doubles, making them for Captured in this remarkable installation, which premiered at the BFI London Film Festival, expanded last year, and just had a showing back in Copenhagen last week. Her talk is called Storytelling with Digital Doubles, and we're really thrilled to have you here today, Hanna. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, thank Kat for introduction, and I'm very happy to share this virtual connection with you. I'm physically at the moment in Helsinki, and I'm checking that my screen sharing works. So here, so hopefully you can see my title now at the screen. Let me know if there's any technical problems. I'll stop and try to configure my computer. But let's hope that the technology is with me today. So, like I said, my current location is in my hometown in Helsinki, Finland. And I will have a little bit special introduction today, as the recent events in Eastern Europe are very closely intertwined with the geopolitical history of my country. I feel that I cannot ignore them at the moment. And like many of you, I'm in a deep grief and agony about the civilian suffering in Ukraine, and also my own powerlessness to do anything meaningful to help the people in the war zone. Finland, as Ukraine, shares a long eastern border with Russia. And when the Pandora's box again opened a month ago, I felt in my body the return of the intergenerational trauma, which I thought I had already forgotten. My grandmother was 10 years old when the last phase of the Second World War initiated in Finland. Her family had 2 hours to leave their home before Russians attacked and invaded the city in the eastern part of Finland called Karelia. Overnight, 70,000 inhabitants of Viborg were cleared out and replaced with Russian newcomers. The life soon continued in the city, only the people and the language had been mysteriously swapped. My great-grandmother always complained how she decided to hang laundry in the attic before their escape, because they all thought that they are coming back very soon to their home. And how mad she was of the thought of an unknown strangers who invaded their home and started to use their sheets and pillowcases and clothes as their own. I think it was one of those nice stories which were supposed to calm me down and not to pass on the trauma what they had gone through. After the war, when Karelia was officially detached from Finland and they realized that they are never going to get their home back, they somehow organized their lives in Western Finland. But I could sense that they were different, that we were different and not from Western Finland. Their family habitus was completely different, that of a refugee. So life went on, and soon Second World War was just another horrible episode in the history books. At the high school, it was explained to students in a very cool and rational manner, but deep down, it left everybody confused. How could this have happened? How people can suddenly go insane and break all the unspoken human agreements between them and start a massacre. So this is the image that really started the journey with Captured for me. I saw it in a Finnish newspaper as a teenager, and immediately it put some kind of weird spell on me. It would start to haunt me with all kinds of questions. The situation it depicted was in such a strong contrast to my own environment, which was a peaceful democratic society without any major religious or political tensions. But only a few decades ago, this event took place in Vienna, the city my family just had visited for a fun summer holiday. It gave me a view to the social reality before the war and to the events and propaganda that sensitized people for years before the actual conflict could take place. In this snapshot, it is 1938 and Austria has just been annexed to Nazi Germany. Public spectacles of humiliation was a common sight in the streets. The Nazi terror had been going on in every level of society for a few years now, and nobody was able to stand up against it. It was generally consented by the authorities. There are many reasons for the narrative of Captured, personal reasons and historical reasons, but I think the main one was raised by this image. I'm sure all of us have been in situations that the roles of a bullying triangle have suddenly taken over our rational minds. It usually starts as an innocent-looking joke or a game. Then suddenly we are taken over by mob rule, like these people in the streets of Vienna. The young boys here, perhaps members of a local Nazi Jugend, have gotten an idea that Jews need to work, so why not make them scrub the streets clean? Gathering random victims and forcing them to scrub the streets attracted a crowd of passerbys who were happily cheering to the spectacle. How do we stop the bully, which is very terrifying and powerful? What do we do with people who think that they are superior to others? This spectacle returns to us in many different forms. In an image which is strikingly similar, taken in the streets of Madrid in 2017, Dutch football fans thought it a clever idea to make the Roma women to earn money instead of just begging for it. So they ordered them to do push-ups. And the bystanders agreed that it's okay and very good entertainment. In all of these public spectacles of humiliation, the structure is always the same. People are suddenly divided in three groups: the police, the victims, and the bystanders. Instead of telling this story with actors or with documentary footage, was there perhaps another way to engage audience in experiencing crowd behavior? So the main character of Captured is a crowd instead of an individual. And here's a drawing I made when I started to think about the narrative structure for Captured. Here on the left is a visualization of a chronological narrative, which to me seems to be advancing to reality as one-directional, logical whole. On the left, there's a narrative structure that resembles a plant that has more diverse relation with reality. It has many branching roots and many branching leaves, and it's aware of itself from tip to the toe. There's no central character, and the narrative is not following any particular path. This is not a traditional branching narrative where you follow a path and then you make a decision to turn left or right. It's somehow aware of all of its parts simultaneously, and it resembles a social simulation model. Now, simulation is a very sort of informative approach in a wide variety of fields. And somehow it gave me a structure to think about crowd logic as a social simulation. This quote by Sherry Turkle somehow defines where we are currently positioned as an audience in relation to stories created with simulation technologies. Simulation gives you an environment to act in the narrative instead of following it. Sometimes it's difficult to distinguish individuals from the crowd so deeply they are integrated in the fabric of mob logic. In the book In Evil Hour by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, a strange group phenomena is undermining the authority of the leaders in a small village in South America. Every night, somebody is distributing posters around the village that reveal dirty secrets about the villagers. Those in power try their best to stop this happening. But whatever they do, every night, new posters appear in public space. The mayor gets so desperate that he asks the local fortune teller to look from the cards who is behind the campaign. Cassandra gives a very intriguing answer. It's the whole town and it's nobody. So is the crowd really a nobody? I also found the work of Richard Evans very helpful. He created Verso platform for interactive stories, and he distinguishes two narrative models in interactive content. One is called the regulative model, and it's very much used in traditional games. It's goal-oriented, and all the behaviors are hard-coded. But then there's a constitutive model, which is socially oriented, and the actions of the avatars or agents are embedded in practice. The agent only sees the actions provided by the social practice he is in. And this could be very well used in different kind of social situations because NPCs make decisions based on their individual preference. And NPCs are the non-player characters, which is the type of agents I also use in Captured. So, how does the narrative in Captured unfold? There are two main stages which are switched on by an avatar that decides not to follow the existing state. And those states are wandering state when avatars are peacefully walking together, and then there's bullying state where the groups have emerged and avatars are turned against each other. And a special avatar is called Game Changer. When it enters, it can change the course of the narrative. If it comes during the peaceful state, it manages to provoke the avatars against each other. And when it enters during the bullying state, it manages to stop the bullies and diffuse the emerged groups. And the narrative has a cyclical structure, so there's not really any beginning or ending. You can visit Captured anytime, and depending when you come, you see a state where it's actually in. So why use doubles in storytelling? What kind of experience it can give to the audience? For me, double lends imagery to the universal human problem, that of the relation of the self to the self. What are your doubles like? Do you feel threatened by the voices and appearances in your head? Or do they help you to find your way in life? Do they appear to you at night to reveal how endless your mind is and welcome you to explore it without fear? In my childhood, I had a strong sense of a person standing every night by my bed. It would always be there, just standing, the head bent down to watch calmly my sleeping body. It was neither scary or pleasant. It was just reality, how my mind operated. I realized that the unity of human body is a fiction, that the so-called real me inside my body does not really exist, but I'm scattered in various locations in time and space with the help of my doubles. The earliest connotations of the double in Indo-European law were benign, entailing the immortality of the self. The double stems from animistic beliefs on the manifestation of the soul in shadows and reflections, but also of a knowledge that there are different agencies in human mind, some which we are not constantly aware and cannot control. In recent academic research on human consciousness, a quantum dissipate model of brain has revealed mental activity that can be interpreted as a discourse. By repeated trial and error, the brain constructs within itself an understanding of its surroundings, which can be described as a double. Consciousness is seen to arise from the permanent dialogue between the brain and its double. However, in the post-Enlightenment era, Western belief in the preservative powers of the double had eroded, and the meaning had completely inverted. The double or doppelganger became a spectral projection of the self, an uncanny harbinger of death, according to Freud. In the 18th century Romantic German literature, the evil double was one of the most popular themes. The era introduced a new type of double narrative with shadow and mirror as its images, both of which appear to the ego as its uncanny likeness. In these stories, the double has become an independent entity, aiming to destroy the person where it has emerged. The main character, usually out of vanity, has sold his reflection or shadow to the devil, with the consequence of unleashed double projection turning against him. One of the 20th century concepts of double, so-called avatar, emerged in the late 1970s, first in the realm of digital role-playing. Here's a group shot of quite famous Finnish Paragon team that was very successful in the world of the Warcraft. Avatars are fluid and performative, inhabiting multiple shapes and identities. Reminding of the ancient animistic concept of doubles, avatars are deconstructing the old binary positions of the self, gender, and identity. As the first generation of avatars were about being a fantastical, anonymous creature, recently the trend is about who you are and how you can learn more about yourself in these virtual environments. Some examples of this trend is social media apps like My Idol and Morphine that lets you swap your face in diverse settings. Also, Facebook has published details about their research on the topic. For Captured, we decided to do our own face capturing platform. When we started to develop it together with Tyler Henry, a creative coder from New York, we were inspired by theatrical apparatuses and early cinema devices and decided to find a way of updating these technologies. For example, the Tintamaresk theater is an age-old gadget that places your face in artificial surroundings. We begin our research with cheap technologies, mainly which were 3D sensors. And Kinect was obviously one of the typical choices. And we were interested of Kinect Fusion, which was a project by Microsoft Research, which sort of mapped the surface, the really patchy image of Kinect in this kind of smooth surface. And it looked very interesting and promising, but unfortunately, they couldn't produce nothing except these really fancy examples. So no code or algorithm was ever released by this research. Another sensor, cheap sensor, what we were a little bit investigation was Intel RealSense. And they had this idea how capturing a texture of a face is stretched on a model which always has the similar facial features. So basically you would always have these ears, you would always have this chin, and your image would be just stretched over this model. And to be honest, the results were quite creepy. So definitely not a technology to use for sort of reliable face capturing. Also, there was one major problem in all of these ER sensing devices, because they went completely crazy with human facial hair. So if there was a person with the beard, they would make this giant hole in the chin. So the technology to be used in a real-time face capturing platform was clearly too unreliable and unstable. Then we tried to find another solution, and that was based on the Morphable Model, which basically is a quite robust technology where you have an existing trained face model, and then each face is just a slight tweak on the features. And eventually we decided to use a technology which was developed in the University of Surrey, and it was called the 4D face, which was very reliable and robust technology to make 3D face images from 2D captures. And I think this was the sort of best way to create faces in our environment, because it was very cheap also to compare to the expensive 3D sensing technology, to have a camera, a normal RGB camera, and then with algorithm do the extrusion of the face in the 3D model. Also, one important reason for choosing 4D face was that it was trained much more diverse face scans than for instance, Basel face. And this is a sort of a constant problem in face technologies, which probably you are very well aware, that it's developed by people who don't understand the diversity of human face. And I was constantly reminding the people who develop the 4D face that they have to get these their data much more equal, so that it understands all kinds of faces, not just Caucasian faces. And I think these are the numbers which they showed me, and I think they have changed, made it more equal. But this is something what artists can really affect when they are using the technology. They should also question how is it made, and who is making it, and for what purpose, because that can clearly affect the outcome of the technology and how is it used afterwards. To build our environment, we needed a 2D image, and then that 2D image to be extruded in a 3D shape. We created a stereo camera rig, which would simultaneously take a snapshot of people's face, and then combine those in a single model. And here's a comparison of the details. Obviously, our technology, the 4D face, is not very accurate. It makes this kind of normalization or softness to the features. Here on the right is the result with 4D face, and you can clearly see that that it's not so accurate as the model on the left, which is done with the 3D sensor. But in the same time, it kind of gives you a little bit of interpretation and distance to your 3D version. You can kind of recognize yourself in there, but it doesn't, it's not painfully accurate reconstruction of your face. And this is a quite nice comparison of uncanny valley to the uncanny likeness valley. So uncanny valley is obviously important research by Masahiro Mori, where he already noticed in the 70s that the more realistic the artificial human becomes, the more creepy it becomes to human beings. And also I think with the likeness, there's a little bit same kind of threshold or trajectory happening. At first, it's kind of funny, but then it kind of crosses some kind of secret border, and there's a sort of engagement. Wow, it's really me. I can sort of engage in a narrative, and this is my representation. This is my double in this story. Another technology which we implemented, obviously, is face detection. And this is a very famous image that combines technology with human desires in a very powerful way. The face detection has now become ubiquitous technology, and because somehow in our culture, the visibility has become a valuable currency in social situations. The Viola Jones algorithm helped it to become everyday technology, and now every smartphone is equipped with detection capabilities. However, in Captured, we do not use any recognizing or analyzing algorithms based on the people's face. We simply detect that the human face is present and create an avatar for that face. In my opinion, all face recognition technology is one of those very ominous and dangerous algorithms which should be somehow banned completely. The detection is done with the technology called 68 multiply landmark seam, and it means that the face detects 68 points spread in key locations of the face. So there's, you can see that there's plenty of key points around the mouth and plenty of points around the eye, but the nose is quite minimal. And that's why our system doesn't model very good human noses. They are quite mediocre noses. Nowadays, you could get much more denser landmark schemes, and we are kind of thinking, should we update it? But at the same time, I feel that somehow we shouldn't be too detailed in face capturing. There's a certain kind of interpretation what comes with this technology, and if it becomes too detailed, I feel that it somehow it becomes somehow embarrassing for people. Also, I wanted to create a physical structure, a station that lets people spend a bit of time with their double before it joins the double community. And this is a picture in my studio. We positioned this stereo capture rig around the screen. And the capturing process takes 2 seconds. And the face is implemented on an avatar, which you can sort of get to know a bit in this scene. You are not alone. There's a character, there's a white figure sort of greeting you and helping you to sort of be part of the virtual reality. And this whole process in the sort of is an introduction to you to be implemented as part of the narrative. And this is how it looks as an installation. So there's 2 separate parts. There's a capturing station, which is illuminated, and it has footsteps marks in front of it, so people know without any instruction where to step and how to start the narrative. And there behind on the big screen, we can see the community, all the captured avatars engaging in a social simulation. And here's another image of the installation, which kind of reveals the whole complete setup. Of course, we can show it in various locations, and this is probably sort of like one of the most ambitious locations we have showed it so far. It's in Luxembourg, in Esch. And there needs to be a sort of direct connection between the capturing station and the simulation, so people can freely capture themselves as many times as they want. They can then spend time in front of the projection and follow the simulation, and maybe come back later and see what has happened to their avatar and how the story is going forward. So obviously, Captured is a kind of huge collaborative effort, and I couldn't have done it without a team of collaborators, which is an international group of people who are managed to meet luckily in various circumstances. And I'm going to introduce them to you with Captured. So here is a sort of, every time when Captured in simulation starts, there are 6 people walking in the empty landscape, and that's the team members. Those are the seed people who sort of initiate the story. So here in the center, in the red, as a red avatar is Tyler Henry, who developed the face capturing platform. And I think he was one of the first people who actually seriously engaged in producing Captured. I met him through a mutual friend, and I immediately fell in love with the projects he had been doing as an artist. One of my friends, Marko Tandefelt, was his teacher in Parsons School of Design, and he recommended Tyler to me, and we are still collaborating with him, and without his sort of very special approach to face capturing and coding, I think Captured would have never been made. So here Tyler is joined by Hamke Heesen. She's from Berlin, and she became the co-producer of Captured. We met in CPH Lab in 2018. And here from the left is approaching Mike Robbins, who is part of the production company High Road Stories, together with Hamke. And Mike became the key animator in Captured. And so all the sort of procedural animations were done by him and planned by him. And that was one of the very exciting parts of Captured, because we actually motion captured all of the gestures with a mime, and then combined those in the game engine in Unity to sort of create behaviors that correspond in our narrative. There in the behind is me as a blue avatar. And there on the right, now in the middle, appeared Alap, who I met also in CPH Lab in 2018. And he became also the central force on actually putting the whole simulation together. So he was the main Unity developer and combining all of the animations, wrapping it all together, and organizing the sort of the crowd logic in Unity for capture. And there on the right, the man on the blue, he just vanished there. He is Fivos, and he is the sound designer, the composer for Captured. And it has been a sort of amazing pleasure to work with these people, and I think the sort of the challenges what we faced never felt impossible when somehow there was a sort of a kind of positive group feeling which always took us one step forward, and sort of managed to overcome the sort of narrative challenges, but also technological challenges. So I guess that's the that's the sort of like the core story, what I have to say. Perhaps I should stop sharing the screen there. So I was speeding up a bit, sorry.
No, that's great. Thank you so much, Hanna. It's I get such pleasure and such shivers seeing everybody walking and faces I recognize in your last video, and it reminds me of that feeling of stepping into your work, which is unlike anything I've ever experienced ever. So thank you for sharing behind the scenes and the deep thinking behind this work. So thank you. We're joined by an incredible group of people from the lab, fellows and associates, and we're hoping to open up a conversation with the lab, and then also people out there. Please do drop your questions in the Q&A. Does anybody have a first question for Hanna? Maybe you could put your hand, your little artificial virtual double hand up, and we can start that way as people gather their thoughts. Natasha.
So, hi, Hanna, again.
Hi.
So thank you very much for the presentation and for your introduction. I wanted to ask you about the technical barriers through the story. So what were the turning points? Did you feel at any point that it couldn't get through, or what were the real technical difficulties that you had to face as a start?
I think there were plenty, and it was in the beginning. I thought that maybe I sort of took a too big challenge, but then I sort of realized that I have to organize everything in small steps, small modules. So first, when I met with Tyler, and he was very intrigued by the project, so we decided that, okay, so let's take first step. Let's try to make face capturing, which is believable and sort of acceptable, and we'll just do it as long as we are happy, basically. And when we sort of when you sort of splice it in these sequences, it becomes manageable. But if you think about the whole, you don't sort of have any way how to get into the problem. And although with animations, that we made a first version with other developers, and it was horrible. It was all hard coded and completely dead. And then I found out this great asset in Unity called Puppet Master, which I completely fell in love with. And then I met Mike, and I said, hey, how about you and Puppet Master and me? Could we do something wonderful together? And then we decided that, okay, let's try to see if we can make believable human animation with this tool. So I think every challenge became manageable when you sort of break it down in a smaller steps. But for sure, the main I felt like when we got the face capturing platform ready, we sort of, and that was also the version what Kat tested and prototyped, and we showed this prototype in diverse festivals, and we saw that, okay, this is working. We got really positive feedback from there. So then I thought that, okay, now the major hurdle is past us, because if people feel embarrassed by the technology, or if it makes them feel somehow disgusted, then you're on the wrong path. But clearly it was intimate experience, but in the same time it was not too invasive, I felt, and that's why it's sort of became manageable, and also inspired me to go forward based on the response what I got from the prototype showing.
Craig.
Hi, Hanna, just wonderful work. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. I prepared a question, but then another question just came up after your presentation a bit, and I hope I can slip both in. I was wondering if you could engage it's my understanding that you engaged the simulation of the bully, the victim, and the bystanders in the narrative, and we didn't see that in the presentation. So if you could address that, but can I ask my prepared question, because it's kind of related. In his 1980 book, Preface to Plato, Eric Havelock makes the claim that identity formation as self is a construction of literacy. He argues that as people acquire literacy, they begin to experience themselves and their relation to the world differently. A literate person grasping the principles of logic in written form experiences their mind at work. Can you discuss how the internet, social media, and virtual reality is changing identity formation from self to avatar? In other words, how does avatar differ from self?
Well, I think that's a sort of like, I love this question because it's kind of like, I don't know the answer, and I'm on to finding out it with my works. And I feel that what it definitely does, what is good about it is that it kind of releases us from this binary position, which has been dominating us so long with our doubles and our imaginary creatures, and somehow it gives more flexibility to it. But in the same time, there are forces which are kind of locking that battle again. So it's kind of very confusing world, and there cannot be any sort of a single way how social media is affecting us, because most of the social media solutions are very simple, and human life is extremely complicated and multi-layered. And as long as we are ready to be curious and look at behind of these roles, these binary positions, we can reach much more deeper layers of identities. And somehow what I feel that this identity has become some kind of battleground, that there is me that is protecting myself, instead of this kind of learning or knowledge sharing process, which I think is very much about being a double, that you can position yourself into other person's position, is somehow vanishing, and this kind of you are somehow too focused on identifying yourself apart from others, and then become this flexible character who can sort of like combine things from different sources and keep your identity completely in flow all the time. It's a changing flux in you, I think. I don't know if that answered any of your question. Good, Sophie.
Craig also asked, and it was something I was really curious about, is the narrative structure of what happens in the simulation. I never actually got to see that part.
Yeah, so that's a sort of thing what we worked quite a lot, and what actually happens is that there are two sort of major narrative turns and two states where people are kind of where the world is completely upside down from the other. So the one part, what you saw here, is the walking state, and that depicts Avatar as a sort of peaceful community walking towards unknown future in a completely empty landscape, you know, going through each other, taking each other by the hand, and then, you know, making this a peaceful crowd of all colors somehow joined. And then we introduce a special avatar which manages to break this harmony and introduce groups among these avatars. So basically what it does is that it attacks an avatar with a different body color. And based on those attacks, the avatars are divided in 3 different groups. So one group becomes the bully, one color group becomes the victim, and one color group becomes the bystander. And just based on your body color, you are experiencing the situation from that role. Then after this state has going on for a while, we introduce another avatar, which becomes which is from the victim group, which is standing up, which refuses to be humiliated, and in this behavior stops the violent situation and manages to change the narrative back towards the wandering state, to peaceful state. And these two states are, it always goes through these 2 states, but it's always a little bit different because it's a game engine. There's various behaviors which are always changing, and all of the avatars, the roles between the avatars are always changing. Sometimes the blue ones are the bully, but in the next one they might be the victims. So you see yourself taking these different roles in this narrative. So it's circling, so it's a kind of circling the roles, but circling also between these 2 states of wandering, peace, and bullying.
Thank you, Hanna. Vivek.
Yeah, thank you so much. My main question is the one that you just answered, but I wanted to ask also, you know, if there's any way to sort of track differences in behavior between someone who is wearing a representation of their own face and someone who is in an avatar that is different from them, right? Because part of what, you know, we've seen, you know, in terms of behavior is that the anonymity of the avatar can actually, you know, allow people to engage in behavior that they know is socially unacceptable, right? Whereas wearing one's own face in, you know, in a situation like this, you know, dispenses with the anonymity and forces people to be responsible for their actions in a way that is not the case when they're anonymized. And I'm just wondering whether that's another element that could be, you know, added into this situation to understand how people might act differently in the simulations that you're creating, depending on whether they are inhabiting themselves or a representation of themselves, a photorealistic one, or someone else. Right.
Well, maybe I haven't explained it properly, but there is really there is no really a sort of a clear connection who you are, because your representation is randomly placed on an avatar. So you are there with your face, but the body is a strange body is given by our narrative, and this combination makes you visible. So very often happens with Captured is that people are standing and looking at the simulation, that their doubles are behaving badly, and next to them is somebody whose double is being kicked over, and you are standing there, but that kind of engages them in a conversation. So it's kind of throwing the ball back to the audience and asking them, so what do you think about this situation? Has this happened to you? And do you recognize what is going on in here? And there's no really a sort of, because you cannot, the only thing, it's wrong to say that Captured is interactive, because it's not interactive at all. Only thing what it does is captures your face, and then it does it, circles it for its own purposes. It shows you, it's kind of like this weird mirror, which shows you taking your double, taking these weird roles, and it's sometimes very unpleasant for people, but sometimes it's also kind of a revelation that that something like this can happen, that there are some regions in yourself that you might not be aware, and I think this kind of technology and narrative allows you to dig yourself a bit deeper. Perhaps I'm not always in charge what I do, and I think we Western people like to think that, hey, I wouldn't never do that. I like, this happened to people a long time ago, and I'm in charge of my actions. But sometimes there are moments when you can't really, you are not in charge. You are swept over by mob rule, and this is what I'm trying to show here, that it's dangerous. It's and it can happen if you are not aware of it.
Oh, thank you. It's really interesting.
It's almost like a deep fake where you're capturing people's faces and putting them into scenarios. So it's a type of deep fake.
It's definitely, it has connotations to deep fake, absolutely, and I think it's a very sort of big part of the contemporary media landscape, what deep fake can do it and how is it used, and I feel that it can be a powerful way to tell stories, but it can be also a very powerful way to distort the truth and use it wrongly. So this is something what I have been thinking a lot. Also, like, am I behaving responsibly? Is this something what I can responsibly do? Like, I'm taking your face and I'm using them to tell my story. Is it right? But I guess that's a kind of discussion what I also want to engage in this situation, that there's right and wrong in this.
Ellen.
Yeah, Hanna, thanks for this presentation. And I think it was really great to see the photograph, because the photograph with the people scrubbing the sidewalk. And, that is an iconic image for people in certain cultures, and people in other cultures have no idea what it is. I've run into that globally with that sort of stuff. But in terms of that, what I saw was a deep fracturing, a very deep fracturing in those three categories. It was almost like a psychic fracturing. And I think that psychic fracturing happened to you personally, which is sort of where this grew from. So one of the questions I had was, in terms of when you talk about crowd logic of unity and the way people interact, how did I'm a little interested in what that crowd unity is, how you programmed it, without the gritty details, and how you were able, because what you're trying to do, from what I can see, is create that same sense of psychic fracturing as you move along. So I was very curious about that, the relationship of the crowd logic in Unity to the way you presented.
Well, the crowd logic is a sort of I would say that we used some simulation algorithms which are available in Unity to create the walking scene and some parts of the bullying scene. But what we really did that each agent or each avatar is a kind of like a machine. It's a sort of pretends to be a living organism. So instead of kind of dictating from above this crowd, it's a kind of consists of these little machines who all have their behaviors, and these behaviors are enacted in presence of other machines. So we built it from the individuals on, and not the kind of like the whole organizing how the whole, like I'm thinking about quite typical flock behavior, for instance, for birds to fly in the sky, and how do they know that they do it so harmoniously. But in order to do that, they each have to somehow be aware of the whole situation, what is happening around them, and since the sort of these small units, these individuals are creating this scene together, we created a sort of like a behavioral logic to each avatar, which then manage to create these three groups, these fracturing, as you say, of behavior together. I hope that
so basically you program maybe 6 different behaviors for individuals. How many individual behaviors do you program?
Actually there were 3 different groups. So bullies were the most aggressive, victims are submissive, and bystanders are just passive. So that's a sort of like a basic character of those avatars, but how they interact is extremely complicated. So this kind of their nature or their group identity is revealed how they interact with each other. So the aggressive avatar manages to subdue the passive the submissive avatar, and that's how it kind of started to unfold.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. I see your hand up, Sarah. I know that Fabiano posted a question at 12:48. I don't know if your sound is working, Fabiano. Want to try it?
Yeah. Let's try. So first of all, thank you so much for your presentation, Hanna. I have a question. Maybe it was already answered a little bit, but I was in the context of post-truth, fake news, and deepfakes. We were talking about it, and how simulating emotions in the virtual world could orient us in the real world. So between real and virtual world, yeah.
I think the sort of you were asking about the emotions, how emotions.
Simulating emotions.
Okay, right. Okay, I think I understood. So I think this is really part of the same discussion of making an avatar a machine. So all of these emotions are aroused by the interaction between avatars. So they don't really, there's no emotions actually at all, but when these avatars meet and something happens between them, somebody is totally passive and doesn't do anything when another avatar is aggressive, it's an emotion for us. We get emotional for that, and we sympathize with the situation, but it's just built on the interaction, the really how these avatars, so bring a persons who are extremely aggressive and persons who are extremely passive. I'm thinking about horribly now Russia and Finland. So what's happening between them is emotions. It's something what is not from a single person, but created by these contacts and connections, I think.
Sarah.
Hi, thank you. Wonderful work, Hannah. Just really, really thought-provoking and beautiful. My question is around people's connections to these avatars and these doubles. You know, you started out the talk with your relationship to doubles, and then when you were describing this experience, you said they could spend as much time sort of creating the avatar and watching that, and then when it was out in the social world, they could sort of come and go and watch it. And I'm curious how much people connect to their avatars with their face when they're watching it, and does it, you know, dependent on what the avatar does, you know, change the connection or the reaction, and what kind of experience do you create in these experiences to know this and to watch sort of how people connect?
Yes, so this was like one of my favorite areas in this one, because I think the sort of the way you meet your double, and it happens so without warning. Nobody's, hey, your double is being created now, be careful. Nothing like that wasn't revealed. It was just happening, and it was there, and it was taken care of, somehow nurtured by this white character there. And it was such a pleasure to show this prototype for people, because then I engage in this conversation, like, what does this mean to you and how do you feel? And very often people started to think about their family. Like, I look like exactly like my brother. Like, this is like my, so there was something of the habitus of the person captured. And that was really, I think, amazing. So that so your personality somehow enlarged. Like, it was not just me and my looks, because my worst fear was that, okay, people are now hating their nose in captured, and they cannot get over it that they look like this, because of course we all have our own personal face traumas, but somehow that was forgotten, and you could sort of think about you as a sort of representative of a family or a certain kind of past, and I felt that relaxed people, that it was not only your identity or your face, it kind of summed up something. And also it sort of I felt a good connection with the double, so that you were somehow there, you were interpreted, you were part of the double, but you were not sort of like extremely tightly responsible for it. So you could also watch your double being extremely bad and be the bully and attack others. And because it sort of went to the theatrical dimension in a way with that interpretation. And I think that was really important, because if people couldn't watch their doubles, if people couldn't follow the narrative, like, what's the point of making this? There's really the finding the balance of the sort of effortlessness of creating the double, and at the same time modeling it, the appearance, so that it doesn't really, you are in a play, you are part of the narrative now, and this is our interpretation of you in the narrative.
I love the chart you put in with the uncanny valley, where there's like, oh, that's so funny, and then suddenly like, oh my God, that's me. And somehow your piece transcends all that into a different space, into a performative space.
Yeah, yeah.
And did you get that right away? Like, did you get it that face right away, or was that really a lot of testing?
A lot of testing, and I think the main part of the testing went to the illumination, actually physical illumination of the face. Like you have to illuminate it so that it looks good. And so the sort of idea that people would go and take the image with their smartphones was impossible, because we wanted to sort of make a kind of studio setup and really enhance, light the face so that it is, the modeling process is then just a nice continuation there. But obviously there was a lot of tuning and tweaking and troubleshooting of finding. But once we found this 4D face platform, then it sort of started to unravel the whole sort of problem, because these previous technologies were just not close enough.
I like the term you used, mediocre noses. We had a lot of mediocre noses.
Yeah, yeah. Like for instance, like my crazy witch nose is all completely straight and boring in this application. Yeah, mediocre. It's like, you know, this term normalizing, what the computers does. They like to find the sort of shortest possible route between two dots. And all the wonderful details of human ways are kind of like, you know, normalized in that process. But somehow we managed to sort of take advantage of that in Captured, I think.
There's a question from another fellow who's in the chat today. Penelope asks, Hanna, thank you so much for this beautiful presentation. My question is, quote, do you plan to incorporate a sense of the events of Ukraine as it continues to unfold into the work? And as a follow, do you hope to evolve this project on an ongoing basis, responding to current events? Thank you for considering.
Well, I think that the reason we spend so much time in face capturing technology is that I from the beginning I was sort of like firm belief that this is going to be a very powerful way to tell stories, for me at least, and I felt the sort of that hopefully now when we have this our own technology, we can make more of stories which somehow involves capturing a human face and making that part of the narrative and story world. So I hope that I'll have an opportunity to make more stories which contain face capturing in some way or another. But I think the reason why avatars are so simplified in this version is that I don't make direct connections to Nazi Germany. I don't make any direct connections to any particular nationalities or situations. Is that I want that there's a kind of like open-endedness in there, that because this is a universal phenomena. So it's happening everywhere all the time. It's something what we humans do, and somehow I don't want to sort of attach it too closely to certain particular era and to certain people. So that's why I'm not going to sort of make specific versions of Captured which point to certain political events.
Yeah, I think there's about 19 wars going on in official count in the world right now.
Yeah.
Gus from the audience says, amazing piece of art and research, Hanna. Captured is very inspiring. I would like to know how you perceive the materiality of the body in Captured. How is the embodiment experience affected by the production of the digital doubles with the apparatus? Congrats.
That I love the materiality of the body. So one of the sort of really one of my really, I love the topic, and I mean that the sort of the bodies what we are using here is actually, they are called Smpl bodies, and they are from also from university research. And I think the reason why we decided to use them is that they have this some kind of normalness in them to me, compared to typical 3D imagery. So there's no sort of exaggeration in gender. There's no exaggeration in any comical features. They seem to be everyday people walking around. And we, especially in the wandering state, in peaceful state, we sort of decided that we let the bodies walk through each other, so that there's this sense of fusing into each other, and also to sort of point out that these are not physical objects. We are in a digital world, and all kind of strange things can happen. But that is ended in a segregation state where bodies are hard and they are against each other. And every time when an avatar punches another avatar, it hurts. And so I use this kind of materiality, this kind of transparency and going through also as part of the narrative to sort of enhance the borders or boundaries of these digital creatures. And I think it's a very, very interesting and fascinating research area, the embodiment and how the sort of the sense of human beingness, the fleshness comes through in digital realms, because they are so far away from us in all possible ways. And I think we really put a lot of effort there that we could create the believability somehow in Captured.
Halsey.
Hi, I'm so fascinated by the sort of the motionless faces. Of course, you're capturing this still and then putting it onto these very filled with motion, and I would say emotion too. I know you're saying there isn't emotion. Obviously, the face doesn't really have the emotion, but the bodies, can sort of emote as well, I think. And it's sort of fascinating how you've stuck this this motionless face on there, which I think in some ways just is a beautiful, wonderful simplification of the whole scenario. But I'm wondering, just to I don't know, I'm sure you've thought, well, what if there could be motion in the faces? What if you did have the ability to do that? And I'm not sure if this was a technical limitation, or I'm guessing it was a decision you made purposefully, regardless of the technology. But I guess I'm just wondering, what do you think would happen if you had the ability to sort of have faces that are, also moving? Would that be something you would even choose to do if you could do it easily? Obviously, there are challenges, but let's pretend the challenges were sort of solved. I'm just curious as to what you feel that would do to the piece as it stands.
I think, yeah, that was a lot of what we discussed during the production. Like, should we go there? And I think, like, my problems mainly going that far is somehow ethical at the moment. I feel that there's some kind of secret boundary on making somebody's face react or move or say. I don't know, I have to still like justify it to myself personally that I would do something like that, because I feel that this is also already quite a lot that you are capturing people's faces and you're making them part of the narrative. But also there was, I mean, all of the technologies what I have encountered on actually animating faces are producing so poor results. So I'm of course thinking that maybe someday there is a narrative where I could use also facial expressions and maybe even vocal expressions. But I think for Captured, it's something what I didn't want to do. And I like you said, I felt that it's the bodies which do the talking, and the faces are there just for the ride somehow. and I felt that this is it's kind of enough for this experience to introduce as a sort of new way of telling stories.
Sherry from the chat has a question. What are some of the negative unintended consequences of this kind of technology and simulation?
Well, I think you like there's a lot of ethical questions, and I really think about them carefully, and I'm all the time questioning myself, is this right? Should I use them? But still I think that artists should use these tools. Artists, they should do something with this, because otherwise if we don't use them, somebody else will, and that will be horrible. and that's why I feel that that it's absolutely necessary that we do something that people can experience these kind of things in a kind of art environment or documentary environment. So it gives them also new knowledge what technology can do. So that I use that as a sort of my sort of justification. Why do I do it? And potentially, obviously, you have to be very careful and be respectable. And I always said that I think that every face what my system captured, I treat it as a sort of gift. It's a present, and I have to sort of be very responsible what I do with it. And I think that's a kind of, if you start using these technologies, you have to sort of like have an attitude that of respect, because possibly things can go wrong, and it's a dangerous technology, obviously. In yeah, whatever it can be made to do.
Carol Dalrymple asks, thank you for sharing your journey and exploration. It's been very moving. I'm just curious, what are the reactions of audiences to this work? Now you've touched on it a little bit about, but what are reactions that have surprised you or your team?
In the beginning, when we were developing the animations, the bullying scene, we were really afraid that people cannot watch it, that it's just too much, and it's an insult to them, that we are insulting them. And that was a lot of careful sort of tuning, like what kind of gestures we can, what kind of violence we can engage these avatars. And we did a lot of tests and motion capture, and I managed to work with the mime actually here in Finland. And then we decided that we have to get rid of all of this traditional violence imagery, which shows violence as an extremely heroic, powerful act, and think about how normal people would fight. Like think about, I've never fought in my life. Like it would look pathetic if I would be in this kind of situation. And then we try to find that kind of expression, that it's actually sad and horrible and doesn't look like an action film at all. It's normal people pathetically against each other. But when Captured was ready and we were showing it, people were not at all taken by this bullying scene. They were, first of all, they had this moment with their face. They were really surprised that I'm there. And I think it sort of somehow created this kind of sense of discovery for people. Where am I going? What am I doing? And many people followed their avatars for quite a long time. So that was a huge surprise, that they became a sort of like an invisible link. You felt somehow responsible with the avatar and that you would follow. And many people would come back again and again and insert their face there again. And what is going to happen with my double? And I think that kind of like engagement was a huge surprise for us, but a very positive one.
Can I ask about the creation of the team? It sounds like CPH Docs 2018, the lab that I was so honored to witness you all in. It really was a very special moment in terms of bringing together expertise and a co-creative approach. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of a lab like that and how that affected the project?
Well, oh my God, it did everything for Captured. I mean, I was about to give up. Like, we had this face capturing platform, but nobody was interested about it, and nobody understood it. Like, there's like, why do you want to do this? Like, what's the point of this? And then like I had a producer, and then she said, okay, let's try this last call and submit to CPH Doc. And then they contacted me and immediately understood the possibilities of the project. So it was a kind of like a matter of finding the people who understand what you are doing. And clearly in Finland, I was in a situation that nobody was really into doing anything what I thought was interesting, and that sort of opened up everything for Captured, and all the main people I collaborated were somehow connected in the network, and I also feel that it somehow changed me as a person. The whole process, I learned to sort of speak about my project. I sort of like, before I probably wouldn't have even confidence to you know, contact anybody and talk about it, but it gave you a sort of like a practical tools. What do you do? How do you produce? What's the next step? And all of this then was sort of organized in front of me as a series of steps, and I really recommend it to everybody. And I hope that I was also really lucky to be part of Sundance New Frontier Lab, and I feel that these are really super important. And I hope there would be more of these, because where the creators meet and where the people meet, I don't know. I mean, that is so wonderful.
Yeah, it's that third space, you know, beyond just pure production or scholarship, or it really is another place for developing these new languages with each other. So
yes,
it's amazing to witness your process. I'm going to end on Gabriel Vieira Posada, who's also a fellow of ours. Beautiful comment. Thank you, Hanna. Very moving presentation. Just a comment. I sincerely believe in the power of this kind of simulation. When I have created the double that plays with me, what I see on screen can lead me to connect with my predominant way of being, aggressor, victim, passive observer, and question myself about it.
Oh, thank you.
It's lovely. The simplicity that you know, all this complexity of the technology, but the simplicity of the art and the way that we interact with it is so profound. So thank you so much, Hanna.
Thank you,
Haslaahti, for coming and being with us. Thank you to all the panelists and the great questions. To all the people out there, thank you for your great questions. We're sadly out of time, but please do join us. Oh, we want to thank our funders, very importantly, MacArthur and Ford Foundations in the States and IDFA in Amsterdam. And we'll see you next week with a talk by Joe Hunting, who will talk about how he filmed a feature film entirely in VR chat. See you then. Thanks for joining.
Bye-bye. Thank you.